Well, hello there, my friends, and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 478 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly living. And on today's show, we are charting the path. Yes, we are. We're charting the path to a joyful life. Everybody wants to be happy. We chase happiness, don't we? And we parents, we especially want happiness for our children, don't we? And yet, surveys find over and over again that on average, we Americans are less happy, more depressed and anxious, and lonelier than ever before. So what on earth is going on here? It's safe to say that the way in which we Americans tend to pursue happiness, which of course is in the amassing of stuff, the fancy handbags, the second homes, the boats, the new clothes, you name it, amassing the stuff isn't working. That isn't it. That path is not leading us to a more joyful existence. Now let's take it a step further. Pretend you're in the woods and you got 2 or 3 paths in front of you. You don't know which one to take. Following the path of amassing stuff takes us further and further away from the path that actually does lead to that elusive, happy, and joyful state. And one more thing, by the way, we Americans, we comprise only about 4% of the world's population. And yet we here in the United States are the second largest emitter of carbon dioxide. So this tells me 2 things. Number 1, the path we're on, the amassing of stuff, is not bringing us towards greater happiness. And number 2, it's hurting the planet. It's time to go back and get on another metaphorical forest path. So today, I bring you Jeff Golden. Jeff is the author of Reclaiming the Sacred, Healing Our Relationships with Ourselves and the World. And this book is one of those meticulously researched books, and it synthesizes what an awful lot of people have to say about human happiness. And guess what? Spoiler alert, the research is abundantly clear. We aren't going to find happiness in stuff. We just aren't. So where do we find it, Jeff? I need to know. So happy to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm delighted to be here with you. I'm a huge fan.
I have a fan. That's crazy. 1 fan. I'm so excited.
Yep. Count me as the president.
Well, why don't we start by you telling us who you are and what you do? But I really want to know, within the confines of your answer, why did you find yourself writing this book, Reclaiming the Sacred?
Well, I could talk about a lot of the things I've done in my life that sort of prepared me to write this, that inspired me, informed me. But I will also say I didn't ever aspire to be an author in this way. I had written a column on sustainability, things like that. But writing a book really came to me in a deep sense of this is meant to be. Some things just really aligned, and I listened to them. And despite what even people fairly close to me said about, are you crazy? Why would you write a book? I just felt it within myself that this was something that I was really meant to do. It was part of my purpose. And I gave myself over to that flow. And so I love telling that story. To acknowledge that is how this book came into being, was by me just dropping into the flow of something that was just really right for me and felt really right for the world. That was its own reward and was very clearly going to lead me somewhere that was meaningful and beautiful, regardless of any other objective measures. I have taught several courses at Vassar on topics related to this. I do have a strong environmental background, as well as international relations and social justice orientation. I've been the executive director of several nonprofits, and I'm a dad. And I am in love with the world, and I mostly love people and other creatures, and try to live just a joyful, rich life myself.
So much of what you said there, Jeff, resonates. And the first, I got a laundry list, so let's just go through them. The first is that you said that this book that we're going to discuss today was a passion. It felt like a calling, perhaps. You went with the flow of the calling. And that's what this podcast is, right? I wish I knew in the first half of my life how wonderful it feels to go with the flow, to follow the calling. I didn't do that for the first half of my life. So anybody listening, if you have a nudge, just follow it, tug on it, see where it leads. The second is you said you're a dad, you mostly love people, you love the earth. I would say I'm right on board with that. I kind of love people. I'm at a stage where I kind of love people, but I really love nature and the planet. Your book has an awful lot of wisdom in it, and it really hooked me on page 1. You make the case that, yeah, we here in the United States, we live amidst unimaginable material wealth, right? However, we are less happy and more depressed and lonelier, I'll add, than ever before. Walk us through the numbers, the stats. How on earth is it possible that we are wealthier than ever before in human history, but also sadder and lonelier?
Yeah. So to offer some context, yes, since at least the 1940s, when some of these measures were taken for the first time in a thorough way, happiness in the United States, the average level of happiness, has been in a consistent decline since at least the 1940s, which is a striking fact given the incredible material gains that have been made since then. And I think that some of us alive today might not even be able to track or imagine how different the world is that we live in today versus then. We live in a world that, as you mentioned, is unimaginable to many people throughout the world, far beyond the reach of what most people in the world will ever experience. In the 1940s, a third of homes didn't even have internal plumbing, like toilets and flowing water inside the house. Things today that are just not only taken for granted, but are considered essentials, right? Not to mention all of the gadgets and everything else. One of the things that the research has been able to clarify in the past, say, 30 years or so, economists and psychologists alike agree that money and material possessions account for about 2 to 4% of the variation in happiness between people. Range of levels of happiness between that person and this person, the vast range between all people, 2 to 4% of the difference is money and possessions. The reason it counts for that much is because until we have enough to meet our basic needs, money does clearly buy more happiness in the form of food, shelter, clothing, medical care. But once we're able to meet our basic needs and at a simple level, then money does very little for us in terms of happiness and being anymore. And in fact, even for people living in extreme poverty, where money does matter, there are still other factors that are more important. And as we get further and further beyond that basic being able to meet our needs point, more money and stuff not only does very little for us, but it starts to, in some ways, work against us, which is something we can dive a little more fully into later on. But that's all part of what accounts for this fact that somehow, despite the massive material gains of our society, we are in many ways. It was Mother Teresa, the Catholic nun who worked with extremely impoverished people in India. She said that she's never seen material poverty anywhere else like what she experiences in India. But she also said she's never experienced what she called the spiritual poverty that she experienced in the United States anywhere else, that it blew her mind, the depth of spiritual poverty here. And she was referring to these things about just fundamental well-being in terms of how we're feeling, how happy we are, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, sense of, even I'm just going to use the word love. How much do we love ourselves? How much do we feel loved in the world? Things like that.
Your book does make the point that, yes, we are, as a nation, more depressed, lonelier, less happy than ever before. But how can we say that such outcomes are due to our material wealth? Like, I'm sure there's listeners who are listening to our conversation right now and say, those two are mutually exclusive, right? The material wealth is not doing anything in terms of lowering our happiness. Correct
Right.
them.
Yeah. Also, probably a common sentiment that I find myself thinking sometimes is like, well, I'd rather figure that out for myself. If tremendous material wealth doesn't boost happiness, I'd rather take my chances with that. But first of all, the evidence is really, there's tons of it, and it's very clear and consistent. The foremost expert in the psychology of happiness, Ed Diner, once summarized it by saying that materialism is toxic for happiness. And there are ways that, first of all, just being materialistic, having that orientation of defining ourselves, experiencing ourselves, and orienting ourselves around money and stuff undermines our well being. But beyond that, what also happens is that the more that we orient towards those things, we tend to compromise those things that really do matter. And this is obvious and intuitive. The research backs it as well, but probably everyone listening can just look around themselves and in their own lives and see that, yes, the amount of time that people spend working in this society, which is far more than most people throughout the world, and way more than most people have worked throughout time. There was one researcher who calculated that Americans work more than medieval peasants did. The more time that we spend oriented around those things, the more that we compromise, for example, the time we spend with friends and family, simple leisure time, or just having time to slow down and take a breath and be calm and relax, physical activity, the amount of time we spend sleeping. Most Americans are super sleep deprived, which has a very strong relationship with happiness. And yet we chase the money and the job and the stuff to such a degree that for most of us, that's just an understood thing that, yeah, you only get this much sleep because you have to work that much. It's all complicated. And there are very good reasons why someone might think that more money can support more happiness. Money does contribute to happiness to a certain degree. It's mostly when you don't have enough of it to meet your basic needs. But even once you're past that, there have been some studies done that suggest that even if you've got $1 million, when you still make more money, you might feel a little more satisfaction with yourself in your life. You might feel a little more successful. It's not consistent, and it's a very tiny boost that you get. And again, oftentimes it comes at the expense of these factors that really do significantly matter. And I've said a lot. Let me share just one more study. People who win huge amounts in the lottery, first of all, on average, about 3 months out, they're just as happy afterwards as they were before. But a lot of them will also tell you about a lot of the hits that their lives and their happiness have taken, just in terms of what it means to manage or be thinking about or have everyone else around them just be thinking about money and stuff. So there are actually very serious costs, both for us and, of course, for our society and the environment.
We're definitely going to get to the environmental piece in a minute, but you gave me the best explanation for why materialism is toxic to happiness. And I'm going to restate it just to make sure I understand. You said that when we orient ourselves around the success, the career, the stuff, we are neglecting the family, the friends, the quality time, the hobbies, the moments of joy. I think that was your point. And that totally resonates with me. However, the problem comes into play when we realize and we bring into this conversation the fact that we live in a hyper-capitalist society. And so when we see other people orienting themselves around the job, the money, the new boat, name the thing, it can be hard, difficult, impossible to do something different, go against the grain, live a different way. And I'd also say, too, that for people who are not well-versed in these topics, when they're feeling lonely, unhappy, sad, they likely double down on the overwork, on the acquisition of material items, because they've been taught in our capitalist society that happiness is found in the accumulation of things and money. What do you say to all that?
First, I just want to say what you said there at the end is absolutely right. And the research backs you up entirely. The key ways that money tends to hook so many of us, even though it does so little for our actual happiness or being, really does have to do with the absences or the deficiencies in our lives. It is when we are feeling fearful or overwhelmed, when we're feeling insecure, either just about who we are as a person or insecure in the world, the state of the world, if we're just not feeling happy, a sense of belonging or purpose, it's in the absence of these things that money hooks us, exactly because, as you described, it's a way that not only have we been taught in the society is where you go to take care of yourself, but also it is a way that we can try to distract ourselves. Like you mentioned, working a lot. Throwing yourself into work more is a great way to not feel things at times and to not have to notice or pay attention to the fact that I'm not very happy or this life is not very satisfying for me. Oh my God, I'm hitting midlife. What am I doing? There are beautiful things that come with listening to that and creating the space to actually feel and hear those things. It can be scary and it can be disruptive at times, but huge rewards. But that isn't always the first place we're going to go. The first place does tend to be we make money and possessions an even higher priority. The other thing I'd say is you are 100% correct that there's an aspect to this that's about the society we live in, the culture we live in. And we, again, do live in, objectively, one of the most materialistic cultures that has ever existed. So our sense of what we need to be happy, what is just normal, is light years beyond what most people today or throughout time have ever considered. And I would suggest that the goal for each of us does not need to be to entirely buck the system or completely repudiate everything, which some people can and will do, and that's awesome, and there are going to be huge rewards for them. But for most of us, I think it's more about the little things. It's about the smaller decisions that we make that can have a ripple effect in our lives and maybe even build over time to create even more possibility. One of them that isn't easy to shift automatically, but is something that's good to keep in mind, is that the neighborhood that we live in has a huge impact on our sense of what is normal and what is expected. As you mentioned, like, where are the neighbors going during vacation? What do their kids have that my kids don't have? What are they doing in their free time? All of this is so oriented for us and our children and friends around the people that are around us. Being thoughtful about that from the get go when you are deciding on places to live, whenever you're considering a move or a move is upon you, to maybe not try and maximize some of the qualities that people tend to think of as the nice neighborhoods, and try and find one that feels a little bit more down to earth and modest. And that can have ripple effects for decades, right? Again, just based on what the expectations of you and the people around you are going to be. And the other thing is that no matter where you're living, though, I think that there are always opportunities to just lean a little bit more into those things that do matter and that really can nourish our well being, and a little bit away from the material things. And so it's not about entirely turning off some of our habits or the ways that we've been conditioned to think and to live, but just to nourish some of those blossoms within ourselves and within our lives, and to see how they bloom. So whether it's just listening to this podcast regularly and just giving yourself time to sit and drink a cup of tea while listening, or going for a walk in nature, or I might be jumping ahead in terms of some of our conversation, but one of the most, or arguably the single most important factor in terms of our happiness is our relationship with ourselves. The quality of how we feel about ourselves and in our lives is the most significant factor in terms of how happy we are. Most of us have been deeply conditioned in this society to, in some ways, think very little of ourselves and to think a lot of negative things about ourselves. A lot of us got those messages from parents or other adults or even just other kids when we were little, and they get inside us in a really deep way. And they, whether we're conscious of it or not, deeply affect how we feel about ourselves, how we feel in our lives, and in many ways, how we behave. It undermines our well being. There's so much more I could say about that, but I just want to give that as an example of, if someone makes a commitment to just regularly, in some way, softening those places within themselves, drawing a little bit closer to those things that maybe they think are just wrong about themselves, or that they wouldn't normally even want to think about or have other people know. For some people, that's a therapist. For some people, it's AA. For some people, it's just a good friend or a religious counselor. But the more that we just open those spaces and give them a little breath, they do soften. And the returns are amazing in terms of how we move in the world and how we feel in the world. So that's just one example of you don't need to buck the entire system to still find ways to cultivate the garden within you a little bit more and let that blossom and to enjoy the delight of everything that comes with that.
Yeah, everything you're saying there, Jeff, really brings home the point that we're chasing the wrong things in our quest for material wealth and all the products that are out there. We're hurting ourselves. We're also hurting our children, our grandchildren, those who come after us. We're harming the planet. Just read the news. Just open the newspaper. Biodiversity's down. The planet's heating. So if there are so many problems associated with chasing material wealth, but we all want to be happy. I've never met a human that doesn't want happiness. Where instead should we be looking? I know you mentioned having a positive relationship with yourself. Are there any other areas in which research may guide us?
Yes, absolutely. I want to list those. And first, to your larger point, I think about it this way that we're all inside this box that's careening down the side of a mountain, right? And we're going off ever larger cliffs. And the orientation for many of us is how do we keep ourselves from going off those really huge cliffs that just keep getting bigger that are ahead? And that's an essential question. And there are tons of things we can do inside the box to keep addressing those, right? And in some ways, actually, I think the term sustainability speaks to that. It's about taking this larger system and its general orientation around what progress looks like and sort of material things as being a measure of success and purpose. And we're generally heading the right direction, but how do we curb that a bit? I think that is, I use that term and it's a vital term in terms of thinking about how do we put the brakes on so much that is not working around us. But ultimately, the real opportunity here is to get out of the box. It's not to learn how to make the best of being inside the box, but how to just step out of it and relate to ourselves and the world in an entirely different way. And the research does point the direction very clearly in some respects around that. And I think there are two different realms that I think of this in. The first is the world around us and our lives, and the other is the world inside us. And some of the external factors I mentioned, time with friends and family, is one of the clearest measures that you could look at objectively if you were on the outside of someone's life and you look at how many friends they have and the amount of time they spend with friends and family. And that will be the easiest thing you can use to predict how happy that person is. It's very consistent. Also, our physical health matters, not as much as many people often assume, but it matters a lot more than money, for example. And that's something that often is compromised, along with, for example, our sleep. The amount of time that we work, a lot of studies that especially took advantage of COVID and the pandemic to explore what is the optimal amount of time for people to spend working. And really, it seemed like it was optimized around 8 hours a week. So there are things like that in the world around us that we can tend to. And then also, though, I did give a nod already to it is our inner worlds that actually have by far the greatest effect on our well-being and our happiness. And that does have to do with some of the things I mentioned around like a sense of purpose, being in touch with our emotions. Interestingly, yes, people who tend to experience more positive emotions are happier in general, but overall, the happiest among us are those who allow themselves to feel a full range of human experiences, of human feelings, including sadness, anger, fear. It's not boxing up these aspects of our humanness, but allowing them to blossom as well and to serve the really vital, deep, beautiful functions that they were evolved to fulfill in us. So the more that we allow for, say, a broad richness of experiences rather than just boxing things up or trying to avoid some of those, that has a significant effect on both how we feel and how we move in the world in terms of not constricting ourselves so much. It even reminds me of where we started in terms of me talking about writing the book and doing this work and just following my passion, being open to that felt sense of what I was being drawn to, having the space and an openness to feeling those things, to hearing maybe the quiet whispers within ourselves and not just turning those off or trying to turn away from those because they might be telling me things I didn't originally think I wanted to hear. A sense of gratitude, I think in some ways starts to get at that bigger picture that I was talking about getting outside the box. The research is again clear around the more materialistic we are and the more that we have in terms of money and possessions, the more fleeting joy is, the less we're able to savor life's simple pleasures. If we flip that and instead look to nourish a sense of gratitude, and again, even just to give ourselves the time to experience the spaciousness and abundance of the world and in our lives, having a sense of gratitude is a very important factor. And I feel like that sort of is a nod towards what I was saying about getting outside the box. It's about reorienting ourselves in terms of how we think of ourselves, how we think of the world. The research backs this that, for example, if people keep a gratitude journal and every night list out maybe 10 things that they're grateful for, or a prominent expert in this field, Robert Holden, he has people keep a list of 100 gratitudes. So it's not like an every night thing, but just one time over the course of a matter of weeks, list out 100 things you're grateful for. And these aren't always positive things per se, but they're things that we acknowledge that, okay, that was really hard, but there was still something really positive, or I'm really grateful still for some of the things that came out of that. It's about the glass being half full or half empty. They're both objectively true, but which one do we want to inform how we feel throughout our lives, this one precious life that we have? Do we want to be oriented in a way that is appreciative and grateful and, yes, more joyful, or one that is oriented towards the things that are, I would suggest that it's actually even more accurately about the glass being 98% full and 2% empty, because we do tend to focus on that 2% where we're coming up short or there's awfulness happening in the world. And yet, if we just pause and take a moment, and again, I'll even use that idea of step outside of the box and acknowledge so much that we do have, the gifts that are being showered on us in every moment and every day of our lives are so profound. In fact, there's something a little curmudgeonly or violent in turning away from those and orienting just towards this one little small piece of our lives where things are not good. And I'm talking about things that you've talked about on your podcast, for example, our breath, the air around us, movement, laughter, music, air, color, light, and the birth of a new day, bird song. So many things that we do have, but that we so often lose sight of in the rush, right? And so gratitude and having just a general orientation towards appreciating so many of the gifts that we do have, it does bring greater happiness. The research is clear. And as you've noted, it really does help us to release our need for so many things, for so much stuff, and to just keep diving back into that rat race.
So much you said there, Jeff, and I want to talk a little bit more about getting out of the box, like not learning how, I love that analogy, not learning how to live in the box, but getting outside of the box completely, like escaping the box. One thing you said there was healing our relationship with ourselves. I want to talk more about that with you. We have to take our sponsor break, but when we come back, I really was fascinated in your book about your musings on ownership. We're going to talk about ownership as potentially a way by which we seek to feel better about ourselves. We're going to go there after our sponsor break. And we're back. Today I'm speaking with Jeff Golden. He is the author of Reclaiming the Sacred, Healing Our Relationships with Ourselves and the World. And before the break, we were really hitting our stride, Jeff, with regard to healing our relationships with ourselves. Because when we feel better about ourselves, we look externally for feel-goodness. That's not a term, but we look less externally to feel better about ourselves, I think is what I'm trying to say there. Now, your book had an awful lot to say about ownership, property. I've honestly, since reading these parts of your book, really, they've sat with me, they've stayed with me. And you mentioned that feeling good about ourselves is one powerful way by which to increase our own levels of happiness and well-being. And yet again, I come back to our capitalist culture because it ingrains so much within us from birth. Our culture tells us that to feel good about yourselves, you have to have external accolades, like a nice house. The boat keeps coming up. I don't know why, but the big number in the bank account, the fancy car. Talk to me about owning. I'm wondering here, and I would love your thoughts. Are we owning a bunch of stuff externally so that we don't have to face our internal sense of lack?
Yeah, you just nailed it. That is very clearly what the research is telling us. It is also, and sometimes it can be difficult when we are so inside the culture to see this, but I don't think you have to step outside it very long or just slow down and take a breath and reflect on it before it becomes pretty obvious that this is the case. And it's what people outside the culture or on the edges of the culture have been saying forever. I'm going to just tell one brief story as a way of entering into this. Let's take ourselves back to the year 1800. Now, at that time, there were about 30 million bison in North America. Bison that the Native Americans of the plains had what I think can fairly be described as a sacred relationship. It was their kin, and it was also their survival. It was so interwoven with their way of life and how they understood themselves and their relationship with the world. Now, and I don't remember the exact year, but I'm going to say 1884, by that time, there were 356 bison left in North America. Now, what happened during that time was there was an expansion of the European white American population, of their economy, of the reach of which they were expanding into economically, and more than 1 million bison a year at one point were being killed. And for what? For their tongues, which were considered a delicacy, for their hides, for their skin, the leather of which was in great demand for the burgeoning factories, for belts in factories. More than that, though, there was the delight in the slaughter. There were many contests held to just see how many bison people could kill in a certain period of time. There were trains that were increasingly crossing the country. There would be people shooting from the trains just to see how many bison they could kill. And also, it was strategic in terms of the Native Americans did rely on the bison. And so there was some strategy behind wiping out the bison, really helped to bring the Native Americans into control of the expanding United States government. I give this as an example of here was a people that had lived for millennia in peaceful relationship with the bison, taking what they needed, but also by many objective measures, both today and going back to then, that say that those people lived a very high quality of life and were very happy overall. And in swept this culture that was only obviously to the Native Americans, there was a tremendous sickness, a tremendous illness to a people that would do something like this. And that's what I'm talking about when I say if we just take a moment and reflect on it, it's pretty obvious that there is something fundamental that is wrong here if we as a people repeatedly go and do the kinds of things that we really regularly do to other creatures, to the planet. And we're experiencing that on a whole other level now, right? Where we're talking about half of species maybe not even existing by the end of this century, the future of humans being up in the air as well. Even the things we do to ourselves, I mentioned earlier, we work more hours than most people on the planet today and through all of time. And again, we live within the culture, we live within a certain society. There's only so much that each of us can do to buck that trend. But at least to have this consciousness around the more that we keep getting this barrage of messages about what success looks like, about how it's just obvious and natural that we should be moving towards ever more stuff, to at least internally be able to check that and say, what am I drinking? What am I buying into here where I value my life and the days and hours of my life based on the accumulation ever more of these things? When we know intuitively, and the research is really clear, that we would be just as happy, or in fact, probably happier, if we just lived simpler lives. If we just took the trajectory of how productive we are in the United States, productivity, we could, for example, today be living at the level of productivity of someone in the 1970s and be working 5-hour work weeks, if that's what we chose as a society. Again, not necessarily each one of us gets to just make that decision for ourselves, but at least to have a clear orientation and to have that breath of air within ourselves that allows us to, within our minds and to a degree within our own lives, step outside that box and embrace a different narrative about who we are and what really matters to us and how much we really matter. Those are some of the opportunities before us here that I think each of us should really try to pursue and nurture in our own lives, to nurture them in the society around us as well. But regardless of what's going on around you, let's try and nurture these things within your precious life as well.
So we have a bunch of different terms to describe the same thing today. Stepping outside of the box, elevating awareness and consciousness. In your book, I believe you refer to these themes as reclaiming ourselves and the world, frankly, as sacred. What would it take to get us there as a society? It sounds so wonderful and simple and frankly attainable when you say it. But in the real world, people do anything they can think of to not sit in silence, to not go inward. So if the solution to our wellness woes, our environmental woes, if the solution to many of our woes is just to elevate our consciousness, step out of the box, reclaim ourselves in the world as sacred, what is it going to take to get us there on a nationwide, societal level?
The great news is, for starters, again, that is the path towards living richer lives ourselves. We will be happier and more satisfied with ourselves and our lives. So that right there is a huge incentive, and great that we have that going for us, because it could be the opposite, right? We could be destroying the planet, but there's some way in which we actually think that's necessary to nourishing our well-being, right? And again, that's the common narrative, but it's just not true. So first of all, we do have that going for us. I'm going to be the first to acknowledge that's a steep hill to climb in terms of changing the narrative of this broader culture and of, say, some huge majority of people in this country. But that's not the task before us, I don't think. The task before us is, first of all, for each of us to just step up and live into the purpose that we're being called to let our own selves blossom, and to let that fit into the larger picture how it will. I think the second part is that it really is important also to stop the box from going over those huge cliffs. And so, even while we have this beautiful opportunity for ourselves and our larger culture to shift more and more towards stepping outside the box and really reorienting ourselves in a way that is going to be best for us and the planet, even while we're doing that and allowing that sort of evolution to occur, we do need to keep doing the critical sort of political and personal decisions, journeys that we are on inside the box of stopping us from doing this incredible damage to the world, to each other, to the other creatures, right? So it's twofold. And I am not going to say that I myself could chart exactly what that path is going to look like. And thank goodness, because I think that, again, what it really is going to take is individuals blossoming in all kinds of ways and then stepping into the world in whatever their own purposeful way of engaging around this is going to be, with more love, greater joy, and a real clarity again around where we want to be heading, at least, so that even while we're doing we're in the good fight of trying to stop some of this violence and destruction and shift where the box is going, and slow it down, we don't lose sight of what we really are going for here is something that's a win for all of us, and in some ways takes away even the conflict of, let's say, the politicians or people in positions of power at corporations who are deeply embedded in this, maybe even more than just the average person, and say that eventually, even those of us who supposedly benefit the most from this system we'll be much better off if we can shed so much of this that isn't serving us.
I just want to insert a little bit of my own journey here. This podcast, for my longtime listeners, you know that this podcast started with the fact that I was looking critically at my stuff, thinking about how it was detracting from my quality of life. And over the years, topics that we discussed on this show shifted into more of an intentional living, practice gratitude, practice meditation, get to know thyself. The content kind of shifted towards that. And in my being, in my person, I knew that there was some sort of connection between I was using the word awakening, or like conscious awakening sounds very fancy and like I'm a chosen person or something. And I don't mean to say it like that. I'm just saying that getting to know myself better was somehow related to my sustainability passion, towards my passion for looking critically at stuff and the material world in a materialist society. But I never knew how I could never verbalize how those two concepts that I felt within were so intrinsically entwined. I could never verbalize how they came together. And you just did it perfectly, Jeff. So thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Wow, thank you so much. I am a huge fan and super grateful for your journey.
Well, tell us where we can get more of your goodness online, where we can engage more with your work. Tell us.
Yes. And I'm going to broaden that and say, how can we amplify these kinds of ideas and feelings beyond, say, just this conversation? And so the first thing I'm going to say is, everyone out there listening who is enjoying this podcast and this episode, please do share with a couple people that you think might be interested. My work specifically, this book is in thousands of libraries around the United States, but there are 15,000 public libraries here. And I would say if everyone out there listening requested this book at their library, that translates into dozens and dozens of other people who then see this book and have access to it. So that's just a beautiful way of thinking about it and moving more deeply into these ideas in your community and society. For each of you specifically wanting to connect more, there is the book. I spent over 10 years researching it. It's won some really amazing awards. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it's wonderful, and you should read it either in part or in whole at your library, or buy it through your local bookstore. Anyone can get it, or the major online sellers. A beautiful, sweet invitation I will put out there is that I also do teach an online course about diving into the experience of this. That is 6 weeks. It's online, available to anyone by donation. I do that about 4 times a year, so anyone could check that out. Again, my name is Jeff Golden. The book is Reclaiming the Sacred. That's a way of finding me. And thank you all for just everything you do in your lives to just find ways to blossom a little bit more each day, each week, each month. That to me would be the greatest gift, is if everyone really does just lean a little bit more in that direction all the time of loving themselves and letting themselves continue to keep refalling in love with the world.
I will back you up, Jeff. Your book is wonderful. Everybody, step 1, go read his book. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Jeff. You have to come back on again. We'll talk offline about when that will be. But thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone so much for listening.
Listeners, that's a wrap, my friends. Show notes at MamaMinimalist.com/478. We do have an eco tip today, and it comes from my girl, Dana. Hi, Dana. I miss you. She had a luncheon recently. And so this is a luncheon that she attended last year. And last year, she offered to bring reusable dishes or compostable dishes to this luncheon so that people weren't eating off plastic or paper and creating a lot of waste. But the luncheon facilitators, they ignored her offer last year and this year. So guess what she did? Dana, I love it. Dana, this year, came prepared. She made a silent stand. She was an activist. She brought her own plate, her own napkin, her own silverware, and her own cup. So she wasted nothing. She got to participate in the luncheon, and the fact that she brought all this stuff, it was a great conversation starter. So I love, Dana, you said in your email you're okay with being the weird person, pulling a plate out of your purse. And I say, go you, do more of it. Start those conversations with others. Go against the grain. If the luncheon facilitators are doing it wrong, you can gently, quietly show them another way. So great eco tip. I love it. We sustainable minimalists are change makers, and change making means sometimes pulling plates out of our purse. It just is. So that's our show. We'll be back on Thursday where we're talking about thriving. I said that on purpose, in late stage capitalism. I will see you then. Reach out if you need me, and take care.